Franchises are a nearly $1 trillion industry in the United States, catering to customers in everything from the food industry to nearly 30 other sectors. Rich LeBrun has been consulting franchisees for 8 years with tremendous success, helping people bridge the complex waters from being an employee to becoming a full-fledged business owner. He's written books on the subject and has his own podcast. Rich joins us now to share his journey and why he's so passionate about the franchise ownership. Rich, it's great to talk to you. I've had the pleasure of interviewing a few of your very happy clients who have nothing but the best things to say about your guidance, patience, and continuous support through the process.
Well, thanks, Layla. I look forward to this conversation.
Well, let's start at the beginning, shall we? What led you to the world of franchise?
Well, actually, what led me was I ended up being in the same place my clients start. Okay. I was in commercial real estate for 30 years, very successful, had a great career. I was running one of the largest clients in our company. It was $1 billion client. And they decided to sell all their real estate and move back to Australia. So at 60 years old, I found myself in the marketplace. And so I had to go down the journey that we'll talk about later about what am I going to do? What's my next chapter going to look like? I wasn't done. I knew I really had another run in me. I wasn't really sure. So I started going down the journey, but ultimately I went to dinner with my brother-in-law, who's an attorney. And we were just talking about life in general. And he goes, by the way, I bought a franchise. And I go, really? Why would you do that? And it sparked this whole interest in me. So I went home that night and started researching the franchise industry. Now, as a commercial real estate person, many of the franchise companies were my tenants. I never perceived them as something that I'd want to pursue to own. So in that journey, I found out there's an opportunity, which I thought was like the best kept secret in the United States, maybe even the world, that franchising is available to everybody, no matter what. Takes some money, don't get me wrong, it takes some experience, but it's really an open opportunity to be your own boss. And so that just kind of sparked me to go on the journey and start exploring this for myself.
Yeah. What was the franchise that your brother-in-law opened?
It's so funny. It's a franchise called Mosquito Joe.
I've heard of Mosquito Joe.
Which he was kind of an early adopter. And so he's done very well with the franchise. And so it's kind of changed. It was something he wanted to do for his next chapter in life, leave something legacy for his kids, and have some diversification from being an attorney. And so, yeah, it was kind of, who would have guessed, right?
I know from practicing law to Mosquito Joe, it's a pretty big jump. And these are some of the questions that I want to ask you, Rich. So after you saw that he had done it, you had done your research, did you end up opening a franchise yourself, or did you immediately go into your own business?
Well, I didn't, initially I tried some of the things. We'll talk about the options that all our clients have. So I kind of went down each one of those options. But ultimately I was working with a franchise consultant, the trade that I do right now. Okay. And as he's showing me different brands based on my interests, I stopped along the way. I said, well, tell me more what you do. Okay. And so I really kind of dived into what he did. And I said, this really kind of fits where I'm at in life. It had all the components of, I get to work from home. I didn't have to have employees. I could be mobile. I could work anywhere I want to work, which was really important to me in this next chapter. And so I've ultimately bought a franchise to learn how to be a franchise consultant.
Oh, fascinating. What was the franchise?
It's called the Franchise Brokers Association, and it's a great educational process to get me started and got me launched and taught me a new trade. And then because I've never been in sales in my whole life, so this is a big adventure for me. I found this niche called consultative sales, which fit me real well. I love teaching. I love coaching. I didn't necessarily like cold calling. Okay. So when I learned about the consulting side, that it's really kind of a really more of a coaching environment, I said, this fit me perfectly. And so the franchise taught me the trade and the lingo, and it's been a wonderful experience. I wish I would have done it earlier, actually.
That's interesting. And when you think of real estate, you think of it as being Sales driven, I'm sure, obviously, if you are a realtor or a broker or something like that, you're dealing with buying and selling all the time, representing people who are buying and selling all the time. But you say that you never did this work, and this is kind of the perfect segue into my next question, because your clients, they too come from various backgrounds, many times totally unrelated to the franchise that they set out to open.
Yeah. Yeah.
And how does that work?
That's the most exciting part of this journey. Okay. Because when I talk to my clients, they're in some type of transitional mode. We call them executives in transition. Either they're out of work and it was their decision or not their decision, but nonetheless they're out of work, or they're working, in a corporate job and they've always had a dream of wanting to be their own boss. But they're thinking, but what are my options out there? And so when I get them to go on my journey with me, I go, you don't know if you're going to buy any more than I do. Okay. But if you're open to exploring, okay, it's really a fun journey. It's safe. Okay. It takes about 3-4 months. But it's safe, doesn't cost them anything. And they get a chance to learn about not just business, but they get a chance to learn about themselves. It's remarkable how many people start thinking one thing, because most people think of food, by the way, and food's only 30%, a little bit over 30% of the whole franchise industry. So there's 70% of brands out there people don't even realize. But we kind of dive into their passions and things like that. But most people, where they make the mistake is they chase a passion. Okay. In other words, they like to bake cookies, so they buy a bakery. Okay. And then all of a sudden they go, I hate baking cookies because it took all the fun out of it, right?
Right.
And so we really, the approach we say, it's more of an investment. You need to treat it like an investment. You have to have this executive level thought process. But the key is, what do you want it to do for you? Okay, you're at this venture part of life. Our clients are generally 45 to 65. So we say, okay, let's say you're 55 years old. You want to work to 70. You have 15 years left. What do you want to do? What do you want the business to accomplish for you? Do you want to work full time? You work part time? You want to build an empire? You just want to get yourself a truck and a paintbrush? Who knows? Whatever you want it to do, but that's how you should approach it. But we don't know where you're going to end up. Okay, because it's an exploring journey. A lot of times I always say in the journey, it's not uncommon that we drop brands. It's not uncommon we pick up new brands. And it's not uncommon that they pivot. They thought they wanted to be in food and they ended up in automotive. And how did they get there? Because automotive industry and the specific brand delivered more on the things of their goals and objectives.
Mm-hmm. And I would imagine when people call you up and say, hey, Rich, I'm interested in opening up a franchise, have no idea what I want to do. I'd imagine you've got a litany of options. And do you test each one? How does that process start?
Well, it's an assessment. We really spend most of the time we've spent up front is learning about them. We ask them all sorts of questions. We ask them personal questions. What's their hobbies, interests, passions? I ask them to tell me their life story. I can't tell you how many times I found a brand, okay, because of one little statement they made in their life story. I got a great example, like a guy out of New York. He was talking about how he worked for a very big corporate job. He happened to be out of work. And they started telling me their story. He goes, oh, he said, I was involved in my community. In high school, I loved to swim, and I really enjoyed that. And he went on telling more and more about his story, how he became an executive in this retail industry. But I heard that he liked to swim. And so we found a brand that helped teach kids how to swim. Okay. And it was like, he loved it. He bought 3 locations. He's now referred his friends to be in that business. He is as happy as can be. He's living the life he's always wanted to be. That came out of that answer rather than all the other questions like how much money you want to make and where do you want to work. You want to be in New York. You want to go to Florida, whatever. So we spend a lot of time up front getting to know the person, their goals, their objectives, and then we find brands that match up.
Rich, this sounds better than therapy.
Well, funny as it is, Leila, I have a degree in psychology, and I'm finally using it.
Do you really?
I do.
I
thought at one time in life I wanted to be a psychologist, but I find that I use my psychology more in in this application. So
It's true. It's palpable. I have to say, it truly is palpable because I think there's so much that's kind of buried deep inside all of us. And it's sort of that need to break out of the shell, to try something new, but then to be placed in front of you, it really sounds like you take such a vested interest in reading between the lines. And clearly you find what people are meant to do for the rest of their lives. It's fascinating.
well, there's part of our process is, first of all, we help them identify, should they even be a business owner?
Yeah.
I always say if everybody owned a business, we'd have no employees. So
Yeah.
it's not for everybody.
Sure.
Okay. But generally speaking, it's mostly for men, women too, but mostly for men, because they take such of their ego in their job. If they're in transition, okay, this is a tough period for them. Okay. I mean, I have clients from middle management to CEOs. So it doesn't, no one, some make, 100,000, some make, 2 million a year. It doesn't make a difference. They all have this thing about what, betting on themselves. Now they can run a major corporation. They can have 100 or 1,000 or more employees and they do fine. Then when we talk about betting on themselves, it's a whole different conversation. And they go, well, let me ask you a question. Then when you're in corporate job, you get up in the morning on Monday and you go to work and you lead the charge and you're successful, right? They go, yeah, I could do that. I go, so if you own your own business, what happens on Monday morning? Are you going to stay in bed? You're not going to get up. You're not going to use all the expertise that you've built up for 20, 30 years. It is a lot of conversation like that, believe it or not. And sometimes it's just really just kind of getting them to really, I have to get them back in the executive seat, Layla. I had a CEO tell me one time, he goes, why do I want to go from the corner office to making sandwiches? I go, you're not. You're going to go from the corner office to the corner office. Your product may be sandwiches or home improvement or automotive, who knows, but you're still the CEO of a company. So I have to get them back in the seat where they're sitting, which is an executive seat. And I got to get them to think like an executive, like they do every day anyhow. But for some reason, in this category, they kind of put that aside. So it's a lot of fun. I just love it. I love talking with them. I can relate real well with them, and they appreciate it in the end, whether they buy or not. By the way.
Again, it's so much more productive than therapy, if you ask me. Now, you gave some demographic information, kind of who the target audience is for franchises, and you pointed out particularly men who either are thrust into a transitional period by their own doing or not. Who makes the ideal franchise owner?
That's a good question. Now, first of all, men and women buy. I'm just saying men generally have a little bit tougher time, believe it or not, on the emotional equation of this journey. Who's the ideal candidate? If I can just give you I'll give you some reasoning why I say this, okay? When a company decides to become a franchise, okay? For example, Starbucks is not a franchise, okay? So people don't realize that, but they are internationally, but not in the US. They decided they wanted to control their destiny. They wanted to manage employees. They want to use their own capital. They want to control the pace of distribution. Okay. Well, when a company decides to be a franchise, they say, you know what, I'd rather use Layla's money, okay, than mine. I could, do that. I want to increase the pace of distribution so I can have more people out there in the marketplace buying at one time. Okay. But I have to give up some control. Now, I'd rather manage owners than employees, but if I'm going to give up control, I got to find executives who can run a company. You remember about the cookie thing I was saying? They really don't want you to make the cookies. They want you to run the cookie business. Okay. So the best candidates are executives. And I would say, it's not exclusively that way, but it's because of the mindset of a franchisor. They're looking for someone who can run a company. 45 to 65 is a good demographic for a couple of reasons. One is they've built up some wisdom in the marketplace. Okay. So that demographic helps to do that. And they usually have some money. Okay. Now it's a good thing for the franchisor. It's a little scary on the buyer side because they're going to use some money as earmarked for retirement, but that fits well for the franchisor. Categorically, veterans are some of the best franchise owners because they can follow a system. There's two reasons franchisees fail. They're extended themselves. They spent too much money on a franchise, and they didn't have enough money set aside for when things don't go exactly right. Hence COVID, something like that, right?
Sure.
And the second one is they can't follow the system. They buy McDonald's and they want to sell hot dogs. It doesn't work. So veterans know how to follow systems. They know it, and they're good at it. So there is a category of people who just really kind of step above. But generally speaking, it's executives in the 45 to 65 range.
I see. And when you talk about veterans, are there any incentives for veterans to open up their own business, to open up a franchise?
Great question. Yeah, there are almost at least 9 out of 10 franchises offer some type of discount off the franchise fee as their way of saying thank you to the people who serve our country.
Oh, that's wonderful. You've gone through so many steps. I know that you have 7 steps that you take your clients through. First one is just getting to know them and kind of uncovering the many layers that define each and every one of us. Also knowing kind of what your capital situation is. Is there, I want you to talk about the 7 steps if we haven't covered all of them yet, but also when we're talking about money, should one have a particular amount in their coffers ready to roll? Or is there an arbitrary number that one should maybe try to hit before they start calling you?
Well, it definitely takes money. So yeah, I don't want to mislead anybody. It does, but most people have a impression that it takes a lot of money. Okay, franchising can cost anywhere from $50,000 to well over $1 million. Okay, and there's 3,500, 4,000 brands, 300 or 400 coming in every year. It's 30, 40 different industries. Depends how you cut it up. Okay, a lot of opportunity. But it does take money. Okay, but you can buy a franchise for $100,000, and put a 20% down payment on it and buy it. And you can buy a franchise for $1 million. Okay, and anything in between. The nice thing about the business, Layla, it's generally not a direct correlation to the price you pay and profitability. Okay, you can buy $1 million franchise and make less than someone who bought a $200,000 franchise. Every business kind of stands on its own. So people can come in a lot less than they anticipate. Okay. Now every brand has a minimum liquidity and net worth requirement, every single one. So sometimes that line item alone in my assessment will rule them out. For example, if you want to buy a McDonald's or something of that scale, their liquidity could be $2 million and net worth could be $3 million. Well, if someone only has $250,000 of net worth and 100,000 liquidity, just categorically that rules them out. Okay? Of those type of brands in that specific space. Mm-hmm. So our minimum, just for your people who are going to be listening, we say we need a minimum of $75,000 liquid. And for us, liquid is a combination of your cash in your bank, your savings account, any stocks and bonds you own that are not in your retirement account, and then your retirement accounts, whether they're 401k or IRA. Has to be all that up to $75,000, and your net worth is about $150,000 or greater. And that allows you to go on the journey, and then depending on which brand, those numbers change. But it's really more accessible to people than they think.
Okay, thank you for answering that so well, because I was curious. I know that there are certain brands out there that are really popular, pervasive. So you mentioned McDonald's. Can you think of another one off the top of your head that's kind of at that end of the spectrum? And maybe give us a couple of examples on the opposite end of the spectrum.
Well, restaurants are the most expensive. Restaurants, food as a category gets the word most in front of it. It's the most fun, it's the most sexy, it's the most trendy, it's the most risky, it's the most expensive. Okay. So it gets all those accolades, good, better, and different. Okay. But most people think of food. Okay. But you could buy a home improvement brand. You could buy a senior care brand, a brand to take care of people in the home health care industry. Those are $150,000 brands. Okay. You can buy a home improvement brand for $100,000 to $150,000. You can buy some vending brands for $50,000. Okay.
What's a vending brand? What's an example?
Vending could be anywhere from true vending, like a vending machine, like you go down and get your cup of coffee or a candy bar. Okay. Vending could look like almost like a food truck that has more of a vending component. We actually have one that we call it's a vending where they actually make 3D statues of people. It's phenomenal, and it's really high quality. Really, so it's just got launched a couple of years ago, and you have this trailer. You bring it to events, weddings, or corporate events, or fairs, or whatever, and you can you can stand in there. You know your husband or wife, or your kids, or a team, and they take all these shots, camera shots, and then they send up to the corporate office, and they have all these 400 or 500 3D printer machines, and they print these statues, which is becoming kind of a cool thing.
That's a great idea.
Who would think who would want to do that, right? Well, I sold it to a married couple, and before they even opened up, they had 40 engagements already. It fit them perfectly because they're so involved in the social community with their sports and their kids. Okay, it's a job we call semi-absentee, where you can do something else in life and have a business on the side. They love it. They're fully engaged in it, and they're just having a lot of fun. So that brand, who would have guessed, fit them perfectly.
Yeah. And I'm so glad that you brought up the semi-engagement, because a lot of people, they really love what they do. They continue to do and work in the career that they've been doing so for many, many years, but then they want to add something. They want a little extra, either something to do to occupy their time or to generate money. And so it doesn't necessarily have to be hands-on all the time, because like when you were talking about the restaurant business, I grew up in the restaurant business, and I know that it's a 25-hour a day, 8-day a week kind of job sometimes, and you really have to be very present.
Yeah, you bring up a very good point. Just remember, I said the reason we approach this is from a perspective of what do you want the business to do for you?
Yeah.
Some people just want to make some extra money. Mm-hmm. Some people want to, buy it for their kids. Some one of the spouses may have come back from being at home raising kids and want to get back in the marketplace, and they want to go that route. There are ways that we tell people. I have people who make all sorts of money. It makes no difference to me how much people make. I said, we could replace that income. We could double your income. Okay, we could triple your income. It's a time factor. Time is the commodity. Now, if you're 65 and you want to retire at 70, that's probably not a possibility. But if you're 40 or 45 and you got a little bit more runway ahead of you, we can just take our time and build, and you be what we call build your mini empire, right? I get my haircut at a place called Sports Clips, good, better, and different. I like it. The guy owns 40 of them. Okay.
Oh my gosh.
He didn't, and I was just talking to the lady who's cutting my hair. I said, how often do you see the owner? She goes, once every couple of months. So
wow.
You can create a lifestyle. And I use these examples, and I said, I'm not afraid to say these things because they get validated in our process. So people go, well, Rich, you're making outrageous claims. I go, well, just go on the journey, find out if they're real or not. But I always use an example. I just pick a number randomly. I go, how would you like to make $200,000 a year and work 20 hours a week? Mm-hmm. People go, oh, that'd be a good day. I said, okay, let's strategically get you there. Okay. So it's all about strategy. This is why we use passion as one of the line items, but it's only one of the line items. Okay. There's other reasons people want to own a business, and then so we talk about the strategy, and where you are in the age spectrum tells us how long we can get you there, and obviously investments. But it's people can reach dreams that they never thought of.
Yeah, yeah. As you so aptly point out, the franchise industry is a constantly evolving one, and there's so many different ones out there. Some that I've never thought, 3D printing, I never thought of that as being a franchise option. How has the world of franchises evolved just during your career in franchises?
It's evolved greatly in a good way. It's getting more and more sophisticated. The brands are understanding more and more of these executives' needs. They're creating the brands to fit those needs better. Okay. Surprising enough, a lot of people in the executive world can run major corporations, but they're not good salespeople. Okay. And so the brands are finding out that, the good salespeople really can go anywhere they want to because they're going to sell a product, right? But you get the senior executive or a senior vice president in a big company, and he or she gets really worried about selling. So the brands are creating different models, building call centers and different selling techniques, social media, helping build, moving that brand from a cold calling brand to what we call a consultative brand, where you're invited to somebody's business or house or whatever to provide a service. Okay. So the brands have shifted that, okay, to try to make that better so it fits the needs. So there's more opportunities for executives out there. If there's 30, the number changes all the time. So I'm going to use 3,500 for this conversation. If there's 3,500 brands out there, they're not all good. Okay. You can franchise anything out there. Because my clients are the demographic they are, they're very risk adverse. So we don't look at things that are just too much on a whim. We always make sure that the franchise has a good history. Doesn't mean that they have to be open forever, but they have a good history from an executive team. They've done this before. The brand has good brand proof of brand concept. Okay, they're capitalized well. Doesn't mean that you can get in early. Everybody wishes they were the first McDonald's or first Massage Envy, the first Orange Theory. Pick a brand. Everybody wants to get in early. That takes a little bit more appetite for risk. But the model was good. So the owners were good. The executives were good. They were well funded. The concept was great. And so this is part of the validation process. So hope that answers the question.
Yeah, and in fact, you answered my next question, and that was, the tried and true formulas that we tend to see springing up all over the place, and you name them: Massage Envy, Orange Theory, McDonald's, obviously, and those markers for success, and that is the being capitalized well, good management, and how much involvement do the franchises have in how much influence in each individual franchisees as they go on their journey?
In the buyers for influence in the brand itself?
Correct.
Okay, so we have brands that we call empire brands. McDonald's is an empire brand. They got, I don't know what the number is today, 34,000 stores, been out there since 1950. It's their way or the highway. Okay, simple as that. You're buying an annuity. Most people don't buy McDonald's anymore. Corporations buy McDonald's. And it's a cookie cutter thing, and it works, right? If you catch your brand early, if you're McDonald's day one and day two, you had a lot of influence in the brand. And it morphed, just like all companies morph. A company that starts out with 5 people in the company is not the same company that when they have 100 people. It changes and molds and shapes, and you take the best. For example, if you come from the media industry and I come from commercial real estate, and we both buy the same brand, we become colleagues, and then we get to bring our other expertise to the brand. You may add some things to them about media that they didn't realize. And I can add some things about their commercial real estate selection process they didn't realize. And pretty soon the brand morphs. So the earlier you catch the brand, the more you can weigh in on it.
I see. And you've got an uncanny knack for matching people to the proper franchise for them. Has anyone ever come to you saying, you know what, I think this would make an excellent franchise. I've got this business idea. How do we make it grow?
Yeah, it's a small part of our business where we help companies become a franchise. Okay, there's a process to do that. But I just was on a call not much earlier today about someone who wants to do a body sculpting franchise. He has it. He's finally got the documents in place, and he's been getting my coaching about how best to launch that. Okay, and so we help them. We coach them on what it takes to legally become one, how to market to become one, how to price themselves, etc.
I see. And how do you know which franchises will be successful in certain places? Because geography is vastly different from town to town, state to state. Do you have metrics to gauge what's going to be successful where?
I don't, because I'm the consulting side, but every franchise does. So Layla, if you and I were to start a franchise and we started in South Carolina, and we built one unit, we would kind of understand, look at why we were successful. Then we might test the waters and open one in North Carolina, right, and see if it worked over there. Maybe we cross a border and see if it works in another state. But as we're doing that, we're identifying what our demographic is. Who's our customer? What kind of price point, income levels? What kind of real estate do we need to be on Main and Main, or can we just be off the side street? We do that as a franchisor. And then they have today there's so much software that's very sophisticated and identifying demographics. But then the franchisor says, okay, Layla and Rich are going to launch their franchise. Then we figured out how many can we open in South Carolina. And we would say 10 or 20 or 30, whatever the number is, based on all our data. Okay, now that information then comes out to me. So if I'm looking for someone, if you were looking for a franchise in South Carolina, I'd have to go see if there's still availability in that market, because they're only going to open up so many. So on the franchisor side, they're very sophisticated on understanding their product.
Oh, that's good to know. And when is it a good time to start opening additional locations? You've opened your first, it's been very successful. You're bitten by the bug and you just want to open another one and another one and another one.
As a side note, I do a podcast called Get It Done Entrepreneurs. I only bring that up to answer your question. I only talk with founders of companies and executives for the most part. I always ask that question, is this a good time, especially with all the craziness in our world, right? And wars and interest rates, inflation and employee shortages. People go, who would open up a business? And to a person, I got close to 100 people I've interviewed. To a person, they say it's always an opportunity, even in tough times and good times. Just got to be pivot. Sometimes you got to adjust, you got to adapt. So when's a good time? It's always a good time. There's no time to open a better time to open a business than now. Okay. Right. Doing it right, by the way, being careful and doing it right.
Sure. But if, say, this is someone's first rodeo and they're just getting their sea legs in the franchise world, business owner world, I should say, just owning your own business, would you say give it a year, give it 2 years, or start?
All right. Well, yeah, some of that's dictated by the franchisor. Okay. So if you bought 3 units of Massage Envy, okay, if you initially said, I'm going to buy 3, and the reason people buy multiple is there's a lot of business reasons to do it, like economies of scale, et cetera. You also want to lock up your territory so you don't have other competitors, other people buying up your territory that you really want to protect. But once you buy 3, then they put you on a development schedule. They would say, okay, you're going to open up your first one within the first 12 to 24 months, your second in the 24 to 36, and your third one in 36 to 48, something like that. They'll give you the development schedule. And they know that there's a pace to keep, and they want you to build your business accordingly.
Yeah. And we were talking about passion earlier, and maybe sometimes the passion that someone comes to you with is just wanting to make more money. How do you build wealth in franchises?
Well, you're building an asset that can be sold. You're building an asset that could generate a reoccurring income, something you leave to your kids. How do you build wealth? It's just like anything else. If we look at people's investment portfolio, now we're not financial planners when I speak like this, but I always say, look, you have $100,000. You can go put that in the stock market. You can go put that in real estate. You can go put it in bonds, gold, silver, or you could buy a business. And you need to evaluate the return on investment accordingly. But the same way you build, most people just don't think about owning a business as a means of building wealth. Mm. And it's actually, I think, personally, you should never put all your eggs in one basket. So I'm not trying to lean people one way or the other. But building a business can build a lot more wealth than just being in the stock market. And for example, I always tell people, if you want to make $200,000 a year in the stock market, you need to have $2 million in stocks, and it's generating 10% return. And I always ask them, do you have $2 million in stocks? They go, no. I said, okay, well, you can't get there then, right? Same thing with real estate. I said, do you know you could buy a $200,000 business and generate $200,000 income? And they go, no, I didn't know that. I said, okay, well, it's don't get rid of your stocks, don't get rid of your real estate, keep them all out there, but just look at your investment in the business. And then now you build wealth. So you buy 1 or 2 or 3, and you can. Largest franchise owners out there in the country, just Google it. The numbers are like they own 3,000-4,000 units.
Wow.
It's a Warren Buffett owns franchises. Target owns 1,000 Pizza Huts. I mean, it's not a fad or a trend. It's strictly a business model. Okay, that's what people have to get over. Most people, when you hear franchising, they go, some food brand they kind of spout, right? Mm-hmm. It's an investment. It's strictly investment. It needs to be treated that way. And Our job, by the way, is to de-risk that investment for our clients.
Yeah.
That's what we try to do. So we can help them we can't get rid of all the risk, but we can help them make the best safe decision we can for them.
And you recommend now being a good time to open a franchise? Any time is a good time to open a franchise?
Yeah, it really is. It really is. There's a franchise opening up every 8 minutes.
Wow.
Yeah,
Really?
yeah. So it's a business model, that's why I said most people just don't understand how many things are franchised out there. And I always laugh at people like, I use COVID, for example. I don't laugh about COVID, don't get me wrong. But, the world is at the end, and how are we ever going to survive this? And I said, you know what? Even in COVID, although we couldn't, let's talk about after we were able to leave the house, right? Okay. So that for a period of time, we couldn't leave the house. But I go, you know what? You still went and got your oil changed. You still went to a gas station, put gas in your car. Oh, you probably stopped at a 7-Eleven or some type of store like that. You probably got your hair cut. I go on this list. I said, you know what? All those are franchises.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I said, if the franchise industry closed up, there's over 9 million people that are employed in the franchise industry.
Really? 9 million?
9 million.
Wow.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So it's like I said, you have to get people in that executive seat thinking like this is an industry, this is a business model that works to build wealth.
Right.
Yes, you can go have fun. You can buy that bakery. Don't get me wrong.
Yeah.
You can still that. You can still do that. The idea is to have fun and do what you're doing. And so.
Oh, that's wonderful. You did mention one of your books. You've written another book as well. Tell us the title of that one.
Well, the book that I usually promote the most is called "What's My Next Move." Okay, I am working on a real estate book as well. That's just taking me longer than I thought to get out the door. But what's my next move is actually captures my journey. Okay, as being an executive, reinventing themselves, looking at all my options. If I can just speak real quickly to the options, so everybody knows this, there's only 5. It's not like 50 or 500, it's 5. Okay. And so if you're in transition, you either ask yourself, can or do I want to retire? And you check that box off. Okay. The next one is if you don't like your job, go get another one. So the second option is get another job in the corporate world. Now, if you're 45 to 65, this is a real stat, and it can be verified out there in the industry. The average job for that demographic is lasting 2 to 3 years. Mm-hmm. And it gets harder as you get older. So I always tell people, if you have a job and you're secure there, stay there. Let's find you a business on the side. But so that's your second option. You just get another job. And the last 3 have to do with owning a business. Either you start your own, you buy a business that's not a franchise, you buy a franchise. We are only the franchise side of things, but we encourage them to look at all their options. And so the book that I wrote has them walk through all these options. So when they're all done, they've made a good decision for themselves.
And where can people find your books?
It's on Amazon. That's pretty much the best place to find it.
Okay, wonderful.
What's my next move? Yeah. Or if they want to email me, I'd be happy to send them a copy.
Oh, that's very nice of you. You also have a podcast. So where can people listen to your podcast, and what is the basis for that?
Well, my podcast, you can find on my website. If you want to get access to it, you can see all the episodes at rlebrun.com, and you can see it on all podcast platforms, whether it's Apple or Spotify or whatever. It's called Get It Done Entrepreneurs. And because I have all these conversations with executives, and fear is a big thing. Okay. It's real. Okay. So we can't ignore it. I said, I wanted to hear from other founders. I want to hear their story. I want to know why they started their business. I want to know the things that tripped them up along the way. I want to know the things that they did right, where they became successful. I want to hear their thinking about the economy, and would they grow, or should they shrink, or should they run for the hills? I really wanted to know all that. And so that spurred me on to talk with the founders of companies. So a lot of times I send my clients, they go, don't listen to me, go listen to somebody else. Just hear their story. To me, as a podcast host, and I know you do one as well, I learn so much from my guests. It's remarkable. And it encourages me every day of being a CEO, founder of a company.
Yeah, you get to have some really meaningful thoughtful conversations with people. Rich, this has been so fascinating. And finally, for people who want to know more information, want to contact you, where should they go?
Well, the easiest is just go on my website, rlebrun.com, and you can read testimonies, both written and videos. You can see some of Layla's interviews, which are great, by the way.
I really enjoyed those. I really did. I love listening to these new franchisees embarking on a whole new adventure. And they say nothing but the best things about you, Rich, because they said every single step of the way, every question that they had, you were there to answer. And also, to your credit, they said, before I even decided to do this, he didn't charge me a dime. We just had this conversation, and that's really what made them want to do business with you.
Well, it's been a blessing to me personally. I'm 70 years old. I love what I do. I mean, here I am in this late in life. I love what I do. And I tell my clients, I'm going to help you one way or the other. I'm going to help you go all the way to the end. And if you don't buy a franchise, I help you make that decision. If you buy one, I help you make that decision. So it's a win-win for me. So,
Yeah.
but
there's no
if
risk.
people, pardon me?
Also, there's no risk for anybody to just contact you and to start the conversation.
The hardest thing I have, Layla, is to tell people you're not buying.
Yeah.
Because when people go to buy something, they put up their guard, and they don't want to learn. They don't want to explore. And then they make silly decisions. I said, you know what? It's a 3 to 4 month journey. You just go on and have some fun, relax. No one's going to make you buy anything. I can't sell you anything. I'm just going to make sure you do your homework. It takes a while to get in that mode. And, but it's safe, 100% safe journey. It's a risk, obviously, once you ultimately buy something, and we're going to minimize that risk. But while you're on the journey, I think it's a wonderful opportunity for people. Not for everybody, but for many people.
Right. Well, Rich, it has been so fascinating and such a pleasure to talk with you. Thank you so much for being so candid and sharing all of your experience and wonderful, really useful advice for people who are considering embarking on this adventure.
Well, Layla, thanks for doing the interview. I just enjoy having this conversation with you. I'd love to have people just get a chance to take a look at this, consider it. Is one of their options. Is my job is to let them know there is something out there behind door number 3. You might be surprised. It could be your next opportunity. Thanks for the interview today.
Thank you, Rich.